First tonight, we're following the breaking news that the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, has been shot multiple times. Mr. Fico, who took office for a third time in October 2023, was greeting people in front of a cultural community centre in the central town of Handlova in Slovakia when several shots were fired from a crowd. Mr. Fico's official social media account says that the 59-year-old was shot multiple times and is now in a life-threatening condition. Pictures have emerged on social media showing Mr. Fico underneath a sheet on a stretcher being taken into hospital by medical workers. An alleged assailant has been detained by the police, and we'll keep you updated and bring you news as it develops from Slovakia here on Arise News. Well, let's turn to Ukraine, where troops are pulling back from several villages in the border region of Kharkiv as Russian forces advance. President Volodymyr Zelensky has cancelled all upcoming foreign trips as troops struggle to contain the new cross-border incursion, with several towns and villages coming under heavy fire. Thousands of civilians have fled west in recent days towards Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. The U.S. Secretary of State says part of a major American aid package has arrived in Ukraine, with more on the way. Antony Blinken said Ukraine could decide to use the missiles to strike inside Russia if it wished, though the U.S. wouldn't encourage it. Kyiv had previously agreed not to use foreign provided weapons to hit Russian territory. Mr. Blinken said the delay in providing the aid has made Ukraine more vulnerable to Russian attacks, but he pledged unwavering U.S. support going forward.
We know this is a challenging time, but we also know that the assistance is now on the way. Some of it's already arrived, more of it will be arriving. And that's going to make a real difference against the ongoing Russian aggression on the battle.
Big appreciation from Ukrainians to Americans for this. The decision of the package was crucial for us. It's very important to get it as quick as possible. And the second point is air defense, the biggest deficit for us. I think that the biggest problem, yes, and we need today 2 Patriots for Kharkiv region, because the people are under attack, civilians and warriors, everybody, they are under Russian missiles.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he backs China's plan for a peaceful settlement of the war. Mr. Putin said Beijing had a full understanding of what lay behind the crisis and that Russia remained open to talks to resolve the conflict. Beijing put forward a 12-point paper more than a year ago that set out general principles for ending the war but did not get into specifics. It received a lukewarm reception at the time in both Russia and Ukraine, while the US said China was presenting itself as a peacemaker but failing to condemn Russia's invasion. With more on those stories, I'm joined now in the studio by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. Let's start with that breaking news story about the shooting of the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. It's now being officially described as an assassination attempt. What more can you tell us about what happened, and what's the latest update?
So we know that this happened following a government meeting which took place in Handlova. Witnesses described 3 shots being fired. We know that a 71-year-old man has been detained. Police have not yet established a motive for that, but we do understand that the gun that he used to fire the shots was legally held and registered. Now, we know that this is life-threatening injuries that the Prime Minister has sustained. He was hit in the stomach and in the leg, and he is in hospital with doctors desperately trying to treat him. We've heard from the Slovakian president, who has described this as an attack on democracy. But it all comes at a time of huge political upheaval in Slovakia. It was actually just after one of the Prime Minister's own plans that caused huge demonstrations. He wanted to do away with the national broadcaster, and critics said it would be replaced with a channel that would be much more passive, that wouldn't challenge the government. There's also criminal justice reforms. He wanted to abolish the Special Prosecutor's Office. Now, that was established to investigate serious corruption and organised crime. So Slovakia has been polarised for quite some time, but now it really has come to the Prime Minister's doorstep, and he is fighting for his life tonight.
Well, thanks for that update, and we will keep an eye on that story as it continues to develop. But let's turn to Ukraine. And the announcement of additional military aid seems to be the substance of Mr. Blinken's diplomatic visit to Ukraine. I mean, that's the kind of grease to the wheels to this American aid.
I mean, $2 billion is certainly a bit of grease, isn't it? We should say it's not new money. This 1.6 billion of it was part of the long delayed funding that Congress finally passed last month. The rest of it is from a fund that the US keeps to fund foreign militaries. It's not all going to be US weapons either. A lot of it will be in the form of weapons, which will be supplied by the United States. But there will also be cash to boost Ukraine's own arms industry, and also cash for Ukraine to buy weapons from other countries. This is all part of a defence enterprise fund, which is what Blinken is calling it. He says they're rushing ammunition, armoured vehicles, missiles, air defences to the front lines to help Ukraine fight back against the Russian advances. He also said something today which Russia is quite upset about. He has said that it is now up to Kyiv to decide whether to use US-made missiles on Russian territory. He follows the UK in saying this. We heard from the Foreign Secretary David Cameron earlier in the month, who said exactly the same thing. Previously, Kyiv had agreed to only use those missiles on Ukrainian territory, which was now Russian-held, so in the east. But they're both, the US and the UK are now saying you can use our missiles wherever you want. And this really feels like the fear of escalating this war is outweighed by the fear of a Ukrainian defeat.
And talking about defeat, what's the latest that you're hearing about the fighting around Kharkiv in northern Ukraine?
We know that a nearby town to that, the largest town near the border there, Vovchansk, is about 80% destroyed at this time. The police are frantically evacuating people. 7,000 people have left that town. There's fierce street battles between Russian and Ukrainian troops there. A lot of those people are now fleeing to Kharkiv, where they're arriving on things like bicycles with bags of things. I mean, let's not forget that 3 million people have already been displaced within Ukraine. 5 million others have fled the country. This is a very difficult situation. Russia says it has taken 2 settlements in Kharkiv and 1 in Zaporizhia. That is a village of Robotyne, which Kyiv had only retaken in its summer offensive last year. So the fighting is intense there. It's a real blow to Ukrainian morale. Ukraine is saying that they are preventing Russian troops from massing in Vovchansk. And we need to remember as well that this is what Russia does. It uses a mass attack strategy. Putin does not mind casualties in his military if it means he takes territory, and that's very difficult to fight against. And because of that, the Ukrainian troops are pulling back. They're not using the word retreat, they're not saying they're pulling back. What they're saying is that they're moving to more advantageous positions to preserve lives. Make no mistake, that is a retreat. Because of course
that's a very critical point. The point you made there, preserving the lives of Ukrainian personnel would to some extent justify a full retreat. Certainly that's the way the Ukrainians would see it. But we do know, don't we, that the Ukrainians are struggling to contain, you mentioned that earlier, that Russian incursion, and that incursion seems to be getting stronger, more confident, bolder, and overwhelming lots of villages around Kharkiv.
Well, exactly. Now, Kyiv has sent reinforcements to the Kharkiv region to try and deal with this and try and stop the Russian troops advancing. But we need to remember that this is another front. They're already fighting in many areas. There's also today been airstrikes in southern cities of Mykolaiv and Kherson, 17 people injured there, 2 dead in an attack in Dnipro. So the attacks continue on a number of fronts. And I think it's important, I mean, I was in Ukraine last year with our chief correspondent, John Cookson, and the police there, they showed me some of the weapons that are being used against Ukrainians. When Russia drops a bomb, it's not just a bomb with explosives. They almost look like nails. It's almost like a nail bomb, but the little nails have propellers on the end of them. And you can see...
Are those the glide bombs they're talking about? Or is that another type?
I'm not a military expert,
Right.
but it's essentially a nail bomb, but those bombs have... I mean, they're banned under the Geneva Convention. They should not be used in civilian population. And they pierce through metal, so it's unimaginable what they do to a human body. There's also the issue of the lack of troops. Ukraine is running out of personnel. I mean, even more than a year ago, a lot of the people we encountered were older men. They were voluntary. They were being fed by volunteers. This was by no means professional. And I should say this was in Zaporizhia, just across the river from the nuclear power plant. So not exactly in a, quite near the front line at that point. The troops are exhausted at this point. It is becoming a real problem for Ukraine.
Well, absolutely, and that must be stretching their forces even more thinly than they already are, having to plug this unwelcome new part of the front line on the northeastern axis, and concern from the US about the amount of weapons and support coming from China. I understand the Russian President Vladimir Putin is heading to Beijing tomorrow.
He is. He travels to China on Thursday to meet with President Xi. There is concern from the US. Blinken says that he is hugely concerned about the support that China is providing to Russia to rebuild its defence industrial base. He has, well, not he personally, the US has already sanctioned China a number of times, most recently their electric vehicles. Blinken says there is more of that to come, because they're helping Russia churn out more tanks and missiles, which is being used in this aggression against Ukraine. That's according to Antony Blinken. He says that the US is watching the situation very carefully and will take more action, not just sanctioning China, but sanctioning all of the companies involved. It's important to note that China and Russia have now boosted trade to record levels since this war began. China very much backing Russia in this. When Putin and Xi meet, they will focus on questions of global regional security, and that is bound to include this war. I'm sure it will probably also include Israel and Gaza. But we did have just one more part of what Antony Blinken did in Kyiv that I wanted to tell you before we wrap this up, Charles. He was in a bar in Kyiv last night, and I was not aware that he could play guitar, but apparently he can.
That's what he was eating pizzas.
Yeah, he's been criticised for this performance, for it being a little bit tone deaf, but he said the soldiers need to know that you need to know the United States is with you, so much of the world is with you. They're fighting not just for a free Ukraine, but for the free world, and the free world is with you too. So let's take a listen to Antony Blinken with Rockin' in the Free World.
Guitar bit sounded a lot better than his voice, didn't it?
Bet you didn't expect that today, Charles.
No, I didn't at all, and that's a new side of the man. But I suppose these Americans, they tend to have that inclination. I mean, we had Bill Clinton, who came to Nigeria at one point to the Hilton Hotel, went to the Capitol Bar, and we saw him blowing away on a saxophone. Thank you, Faith, very much indeed. Faith Orr, Arise International correspondent.